Who are you? Who are you?
I'm Phil Gindy. I'm the product manager on Illustrator.
And then Adobe Illustrator, and that's actually one of the older products Adobe has.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It's actually our 20th year anniversary this year. So actually, we were trying to think of the software applications out there that are still 20 years old and going strong, and there aren't that many.
No, maybe Word and
maybe
Flight Simulator.
Yeah.
There's not that many, are there?
No.
But Illustrator came out in '96.
In
Or '86, I mean.
In '86, correct.
Wow. I started using it in '88 with Illustrator 88. And,
Yeah.
I remember it was, I think, the hardest application I had to learn then or since on computers, because our mind doesn't think the way Illustrator does, right? And in fact, you have an image up on the screen, which is actually a pretty good example of how Illustrator works. Everything in Illustrator is like a Bezier curve, a line, or a wire, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how, like, I'm looking at you, and you're not a wire, right? You're closer actually to how Photoshop works, right? Which is a grid of pixels.
Yeah.
If you really get into how my mind is perceiving you.
Right? Well, that's great that you would say that, because we've done a lot of things in Illustrator to take the best of working with the wires and the objects, and also making it a little bit more friendly and make it feel a little bit more like a painterly app.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is actually a hand-drawn sketch that was scanned in. And in Illustrator CS2, we introduced this great new feature called Live Trace, which lets you quickly trace in sketched art into vector form. So it gets you off to a running start.
Yeah. And now the advantage of dealing with vectors, with lines, with wires, is that image can scale up infinitely, right?
Exactly.
So if you need to create a business card, or like a logo for a business card, and a magazine ad, and then a billboard in San Francisco, like if you're on the iPod marketing team, right? You have to create things, ads or images that work on all this media all over the place, and also for TV, right? So the same imagery can be used everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with vectors, obviously a line is a line is a line, no matter how much you blow it up. Where with pixels, Photoshop and a Photoshop image, if you keep blowing it up, you'll start seeing the individual pixels, and it'll look grainy or not very sharp.
Exactly.
And that's why I always loved Illustrator, because I did a lot of signage.
Okay, there you go.
But my magazine company, I'd have to create ads for the magazine as well as signage for our conferences.
Yeah.
And if you did the signage poorly, it looked like crap when it came out, and you were spending $400 to $1,000 a sign, or maybe even more. And if it didn't come out right, your boss was yelling at you, going, "What? Why does that sign look like crap?"
Yeah. No, so you're absolutely right. There's a lot of benefits of working with geometrically or mathematically expressed artwork with those lines, and some of them are, what you mentioned, you can scale it up infinitely. You always have that very, very high precision. But there's other advantages, and it's interesting because Illustrator over that 20 years has migrated from initially a tool that was created to create beautiful print content to now a tool that is a key player in the multimedia, rich media workflow.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about animating content, vectors are actually really important. and
Absolutely, because the file size is really small, right?
File size, and also if you want to have ActionScript or any type of scripting language that's going to manipulate your artwork, it's a lot easier, obviously, to manipulate this high-level language of artwork, this different anchor points that you can scale up or rotate, than it is to manipulate many pixels. So there's computational efficiencies in working with vectors.
Yep, and Flash is totally based on vector. I mean, you can put bitmaps in there, but if you look at really how it was built, it was all vectors in the early days.
Correct.
And it still is a very heavy vector engine, vector-based engine, just for that reason, and for file size. Because a vector graphic, like when you finally trace this thing in and get it just vectors, it's very small in file size compared to a Photoshop image that of the same snowboarder, right?
Yeah. So I think the two are quite complementary, and obviously on the Flash side, they've done some pretty amazing things to make bitmaps very efficient within Flash, using a number of techniques to make sure that if your bitmaps are moving in space, you can cache the bitmaps. And so I think that from a file size standpoint and performance standpoint, it really depends on your application. But the minute you want to start doing some interesting things such as scaling or rotating, vectors are quite pleasant to work with.
So what's new in Illustrator? How has Illustrator changed in the last few years?
I'm really excited about Illustrator CS3. There's a lot to talk about. And I probably won't cover everything in this short interview,
okay.
but just, some of the big things. And I like to start in some of the things that Illustrator users will be really excited about. So you've got a 20-year-old application. It's easy to keep focusing on what new things can we do, but things change. There's an obvious opportunity when you have a very feature-rich application to look at your existing features and to refine them, to go back and revisit some of the basics, to take a lot of that great customer feedback and focus on the pain points. And we've done a lot of that in Illustrator CS3. So from the very basics, like picking anchor points, we've now made it easy to pick anchor points. You get a little magnification when you hover over an anchor point, so before you even pick it, you know which one you'd pick. We've allowed...
Explain what an anchor point, just for
Sure. You know
if
what?
you've never seen Illustrator, you probably don't know. Again, you have to switch your mindset into thinking of wires.
Okay,
or Bezier curves.
Let's just. I think this is great. A great way to start. So as I mentioned, this file here is currently a pixel image, and in Illustrator CS2 we introduced a new feature called Live Trace, which makes it very easy to automatically trace pixel images and to turn them into vector form. So I'm just going to go ahead. In Illustrator CS2 we also introduced this contextually sensitive panel, which is really nice because as you click on different objects, different Illustrator artwork pieces, you get those very specific controls for that object. So yeah. I think from a user experience standpoint, this is an area of significant improvement in Illustrator, and we're going to continue pushing that, the more contextually driven UI. Cool. So let me just click on this Live Trace button. That has now taken that artwork and converted it into nice, smooth vector lines, mathematically expressed vector lines. And I'm just going to go ahead and commit those changes and show you. So I've got these, if I click on the actual object and I just need to show the edges here. I had a special preview mode on, and as I let me just select the entire artwork so your viewers can see. You can see that there are little points along the line. So all of those points, and if I pick any specific point, they define the they actually define the artwork.
Yeah, drag on one of those just so.
So if I pull this point out here, you can see how that deforms the artwork. Right. And we actually purposely trace this in a manner where each outline, each sketch line is actually outlined, so there's two paths on either side of it. But we could have traced it differently to just end up with one path, which is the average of the pencil stroke.
Cool. So so an anchor point is, what's the difference between the different points that you see on the screen?
Okay, so each anchor point defines an inflection point in the path. So if I just actually go and draw a very simple path over here, let me make sure I've got a color. Yeah. So as I drag, as I draw a path, I can drag and hold once I drop a point. And these little handles that you see that are being pulled out actually control the amount of inflection in the path. So they correspond to, they actually correspond to the tangent at that anchor point, and the length of that handle defines the inflection at that anchor point.
So in CS3, what was new then? Getting back to
okay, so getting back to Illustrator CS3, as I hover over anchor points, you can see how even before I click, I get this nice little magnification. And so before I even select the point, I'm getting a little highlighting. But that's just one of the number of
So
improvements.
it's easier to grab it.
It's easier to grab it, and you don't have to click first to see which one it picked. You actually know which one it'll pick before it actually does it.
Right, because you can have hundreds of these little
Oh, yeah.
right next to each other.
Absolutely.
On a complex curve.
Yeah. And then one of the other things many of our users told us is they're too small. You know, the resolution of monitors has just gone up so much that they were really hard to see. So we've added more preferences to let users control the actual size and the threshold within which they can pick anchor points. So if you look under that selection and display controls, I currently have the largest size picked, so you can have larger sized anchor points. The other thing we've done, as you mentioned earlier, working with paths or these lines is kind of the core of working in Illustrator. And so we focused a lot of attention on making that easier. As I pick different anchor points, you can see how we now have this contextually sensitive UI at the top, which we introduced in CS2, but it didn't, in CS2, it didn't provide important information related to specific anchor points. Right. So it would work on entire paths, but now it will actually work on individual anchor points and give you key controls. So if I now pick, say, 2 anchor points, I can very quickly align those 2 anchor points, say vertically or horizontally, or even distribute them. So these are the small but really subtle improvements that make a big difference in our users' lives, both I think new and long-standing users. So obviously there's a lot more to Illustrator CS3 than just reworking some of the basics.
Those are just the basics.
Just the basics. One of the very big new features in Illustrator CS3 is a feature called Live Color. And Live Color is all about facilitating inspiration around color workflow, so finding good colors to work with, experimentation, quickly playing with different color schemes on your artwork, and production-oriented tasks around color. And I think it's really best to show it. It's actually a very colorful feature, no pun intended. So let me start where I think most people would start, which is I'm just looking for a little bit of inspiration while I'm working. And there's a new panel in Illustrator CS3 called the Color Guide. And the Color Guide can be configured in a number of different ways. So it basically will help you find harmonious colors to the current color that you have picked. So let me configure it with the high contrast set. And so right now it's enforcing this high contrast rule. As I pick different colors within Illustrator Swatches panel, you can see how it's constantly updating to pick up my current color, and as well it's showing me what colors match nicely with that.
Yep.
So some of your watchers might be familiar with cooler.adobe.com.
Yep.
It's a new free web service that Adobe launched several months ago. And
it's Cooler with a K.
Cooler, yeah, KULER.adobe.com. And Cooler actually took some of the technology that we were developing in Illustrator CS3, and that made perfect sense. So Cooler is all about inspiration and finding good color themes, but also sharing with the community. And so Cooler and Live Color play hand in hand, and I'm going to show you some of the nice integration points.
So if you're a geek and you can't do color, if you can't think of a good color that goes with yellow,
exactly,
you just go here.
Exactly, and I think for many of our even talented designers, the opportunity to quickly find a color scheme that works for them will be of high benefit. Whether they use the scientific harmonies or not, there's a lot of benefit in even just quickly getting tints and shades. So you can see the color guide right now. It's not just giving me the basic colors that match that initial orange. It's set up to give me tints and shades of that orange and also all the other colors. And I can configure it in a number of different ways. I can get warmer, more or cooler colors, or more vivid, more muted colors. So it's really meant to provide inspiration. Now, one unique feature in the color guide is the ability to constrain it. So if you wanted to pick only from specific colors, you can apply an additional constraint. And so I could say, take one of the color books. Say I was doing work for video, I could apply a constraint of an NTSC color panel, or in a print workflow, I could apply a Pantone set as a constraint. Let me just do that to show your users what would happen. These constraints are, these constraint libraries of colors are totally customizable. So if you wanted to just pick from, say, 80 colors that you had and constrain the color guide to just pick from those 80 colors,
Yeah.
you could totally do that. And now you can see
Pantone's a set of colors that's been like an industry specific
exactly
standard.
Thank you,
color.
thank you.
So that when you pick I don't know what a good example is. I forget all my I used to know all my Pantone colors.
Yeah.
But if you pick a certain color chip off of a Pantone book, it'll be the same color on screen and same color printed out. You'll know what you're getting when you get your printout.
Exactly.
Printer.
Exactly. So now the color guide is only showing me colors that are in that Pantone set. Let me just undo that constraint and get into some of the coolness with live color. So I'm looking for inspiration. I want to paint this artwork, and maybe I want to paint it with a red color. And so I'm going to quickly generate a harmonious relationship from that red. I'm going to save that to my swatches panel. And now when I go back into this artwork and I want to paint it, this is integration of the live paint feature that we introduced in Illustrator CS2 that makes it really easy to paint your artwork. So any closed off path can quickly be painted. And one of the really nice things is you can see I can use my arrow keys to quickly navigate through the different colors in my swatches panel. So again, from a
and you're just hitting arrow back and forth.
Arrow back and forth, and as I arrow back and forth, you can see how it's picking from different colors within my group of colors.
Right.
So inspiration happens on the desktop. Sometimes as a designer, you know what colors to use, or you're working away and the color guide may help you. But one of the other important sources of inspiration is on the web and tapping into the community. And I mentioned cooler.adobe.com. It's a web service where you can create and share themes with the rest of the community. And we integrated in a Adobe Labs panel called the Cooler panel. In Illustrator CS3, we now allow you to search for those themes, those tagged themes on the Cooler website that might fit the work you're doing. So in this case, I'm about to paint this, or I'm in the process of painting the snowboarder. If I wanted to search, say, for any theme tagged with the color blue, I could kick off a search, and we're actually accessing the Cooler website, and you can see these are all the themes with the color blue that are tagged on the Cooler website. I can very quickly take any one of those themes, save it to my swatches panel, and it'll preserve the name of the theme and all of the color values. So, so this integration between Illustrator and the Cooler website are really exciting. Now that functionality is Adobe Labs functionality. We included it in Illustrator CS3 English versions, and we're just testing it out. We want to get some customer feedback on that. But you can also go the other way. You'll be able to take color themes that you generate in Illustrator and share them with the rest of the community. So that's
Scoble's crazy color palette, right?
There you go. We're looking for your color palette on there.
Oh boy.
So
no, you won't be.
yeah. So let me show you. Actually, I've got some artwork that will be pretty interesting to look at here.
Okay.
So we touched on inspiration. I'm working away and I want to find good colors to work with. Now what if I wanted to experiment with different colors on existing artwork? So actually, you know what? I'm going to switch to this piece of art to show you this. Okay. So I've got this energy drink here, and I created it in this color scheme, and maybe I want to try and see how different colors might look on this. So I just copied that artwork twice, and now I can go into the more advanced portion of live color. And so any of your users who have looked at cooler.adobe.com, they'll see similarities with this color wheel. So you can, one of the very cool things that Illustrator does is based on what you have selected, it'll automatically extract all the colors in your selection. And then it lets you play with the colors right on a color wheel. So imagine I wanted to change the look of that red. I can do that just by playing with it and seeing how all my colors relate on a color wheel. Or even better, imagine I wanted to maintain the relationship between the hues of the different colors. I can lock my colors together and just maintain the relationships. And so very quickly you can experiment with different color variations and different color schemes.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So you can go and experiment with one-to-one mappings,
Yeah.
but live color is a really powerful feature, and you can do a lot more. You can go from, say, 10 colors down to 2 colors, and there's all...
Can you lock the relationship and then intensify the color?
So,
in other words, can you spread the dots out?
yeah, absolutely. So you could just do that kind of thing, bring the dots out or in. So there's a lot of control over preserving a relationship.
Cool. That's really neat.
Yeah.
You can play with that for hours.
Oh yeah, and the environment really facilitates experimentation. Now, let me show you the last bit behind live color that we're really excited about, and that's around production. So you mentioned earlier that Illustrator is great at creating that type of artwork that may need to be reused. So a corporate identity is a lot of times the material that people will definitely do in Illustrator, a logo or any other corporate identity materials that need to be repeated many times and at different sizes. And with cross-media publishing now, you often need to take that logo or that corporate identity look and take it to multiple media. So working with colors in different media is a challenge, and live color makes that really easy because it gives you all these tools to quickly recolor artwork. So imagine in this case, I've got this beautiful illustration. I'm going to open up the live color dialog. So I just selected my artwork, and live color just extracted all those colors. And look, there's quite a number of colors on the color wheel there. There's I think over 80 colors in this illustration. And let's say I wanted to recolor this down to 2 colors. There's a portion of live color where you can actually control color assignments, and I'm going to go ahead and pick 2 colors from that. I'm not going to apply a constraint. And what Illustrator will do is got really smart algorithms to try to group like colors, and you can see we still preserve the general look of the artwork, went down from 90 colors down to 2 colors. Now it kind of took this green as the mapping color for the majority of the very colorful colors, and then the grays are being mapped to a gray color. I can very easily change just by double clicking and interactively playing with the color. So say I wanted to pick a blue to map most of my colors to. You can see how easy that was. And this is the type of work that would have taken illustrators hours. So live color will help with both experimentation, being more creative, or supporting creativity, really compressing the time that it takes to be creative. Yeah. But it'll also help with production-oriented tasks. And you could.
This really helps because maybe your boss says, "Oh, we can't afford 4-color process. Give me a 2-color process." And
exactly.
Show me what it'll look like.
Exactly.
And now you can boom.
Yeah. Or you've got some print-related materials or print assets that you created for print, and you want to make them ready for video, and so you could use live color to match your theme and your video, or just make sure that the colors you're using are, say, NTSC safe. So just by applying a constraint.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of cool stuff, but that's not it. There's a lot more.
Yep.
Do you want to see more?
Yeah.
All right.
Keep going.
Okay, so
we got an hour of tape. So
all right.
I could talk to you about Illustrator for hours.
Cool. Well, one of the big things is integration with Flash. Okay. So Illustrator, I think some of your watchers may be surprised to know that over 70% of Flash authoring users actually employ Illustrator in some manner. Yeah. And it actually makes sense for all of the reasons we talked about, file size in some cases, flexibility of working with vector and being able to scale. And Illustrator is really about drawing, so if you like to draw, it's often the tool where you'll start. So before I'm
still trying to figure out what the other 30% are doing.
Yeah, I know. That's a good question. So in Illustrator CS2 time frame, Adobe and Macromedia were 2 separate companies, and obviously with us coming together, there was a huge opportunity for us to more deeply integrate. So Flash actually used to read the PDF data in an Illustrator file, and And so there was a lot of lossiness in the process of taking Illustrator content into Flash. I'm happy to say that it's a whole lot better in CS3, and I can show you a specific example. So there are things we've done in Illustrator to make the process of working in Flash a lot more pleasant. Creating symbols is really important when
what are symbols?
So symbols are pieces of artwork that might be used multiple times, and there's really one source. So you want to keep your resultant Flash file, Flash SWF, as small as possible, and it makes sense to actually have one common source and then multiple instances of that common source. And so what we did in Illustrator CS3 is, from a user experience standpoint, working with symbols in Illustrator is now very much like working with symbols in Flash. And the user experience in Flash, the feedback we got, people really liked it and they get it. So we emulated basic things like the shortcuts. You can now hit F8 and quickly create a symbol out of any artwork, and you get a lot of the same controls as you would have in Flash. To the editing behavior. So obviously the F8 shortcut is not the way everyone is going to find this. You can also just create a symbol by going to the symbol panel and picking your artwork and just making a new symbol out of it, and you get that same control. But once you have that symbol picked, you can see we're continuing to evolve our contextually sensitive UI. So if I pick a given symbol, I get all of the key controls right there at the top. And that's a really important thing when you've got an application as powerful and feature-rich as Illustrator, to make sure that users can find the functionality they need. So now by selecting different objects, it's right there, it's right in context. So editing symbols in Illustrator, just double-click on a symbol and there you go. You can just go in there and edit it. And you can see everything else is locked out. So now all I'm doing is I'm editing this tree instance, and if I go and say change the color, let me pick say a lighter green here. So I just changed the color of this tree instance. I'm going to double click out, and you can also use the control panel to exit.
Now all the other trees were based on that symbol.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
They're not clones. They're inherited. They've inherited the behavior of the key symbol.
Exactly.
Now could you edit any one of those trees, and would all of them pick up the edit?
Exactly, they would.
Okay.
So when you're double clicking on any symbol instances, you're actually editing the definition, and if you double click out, it'll update to all of the symbols. If you wanted to break the link, it's really easy. So you can always turn something from a symbol that's related to other objects into its own art identity. So you can go back and forth.
So doing multiple trees off of one symbol saves a lot on file size?
It does, but there's also other benefits. So for objects that are going to be animated in Flash, you want to call them out as things that can be related to in the action script. And so now in Illustrator, you can actually define specific symbols as movie clips. So movie clip symbols can be manipulated in ActionScript. Each movie clip symbol has its own timeline, which is pretty technical detail, but I guess the thing that most of your watchers would care about is if something is going into Flash and it's going to be animated, you can mark it as such in Illustrator and you can name it. So this makes for a really good designer-developer workflow. I've got this artwork here which has been created where key symbols have been defined, so the different buildings here have been named. And I'm going to jump into Flash and show you the level of integration we now have. So I'm going to open up this looks like a blank Flash file. But if we actually look at the Actions panel, which may be off screen, let me just bring that up again. Oh, it's just down there at the bottom. So you can see that we're actually referencing an external action script. So separate to the work that we did to create this monster file in Illustrator, a Flash action script developer went off and created some of the behaviors. And now we're going to take that Illustrator file and import it into Flash CS3. And I'm going to show you how good that new integration is. So I need to say that the import mechanism is the same technology we use for copy-paste. So there's both the ad hoc workflow, where if you just want to copy-paste stuff from Illustrator to Flash, it's very easy, to the more planned workflow where maybe you did an entire comp in Illustrator. And you can see how it's detecting all of the artwork. I've got thumbnails for all of the objects. Flash will actually tell me if there are some incompatibilities between Illustrator and Flash. And so for the most part, we've addressed a lot of the basic issues. Anchor points, that when anchor points come into Flash now, the placement will be identical. Gradients come in as vector gradients. A lot of the content used to go from vector to bitmap, which was a real problem for users. So just to show you how good this is, I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. And I've got a lot of control within that dialog to change things. But if I've set things up right, I may not need to change anything. And so now we're looking at that Illustrator file right in Flash. And I'm going to go ahead and just test it. So now we're taking that action script, and it's able to manipulate that Illustrator file because all of the objects in the Illustrator file that could be animated were properly defined in Illustrator, and they're being called out. So
now, what
you can
kind
see
of tool did the Flash guy use
just
to do that?
Yeah, they just use Flash to create the action script behaviors. And so you could imagine a workflow where maybe the action script developer or the interactive designer and the Illustrator designer get together and they just say, okay, here's sort of what I'm thinking, here's what I want to animate, and then the designer says, here's how I'm going to draw things, and then they just agree on a convention around naming, and now you have this very nice interchange between one and the other.
That is really...
Yeah.
Who knew when Illustrator started out that you could animate, drawings like this?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the very cool things is that you can also take that Illustrator content and test it on a mobile device. So I'm not sure if you've seen some of the integration that we've done with mobile.
We've seen the mobile device. What do you call it?
The Device Central. Yeah. So Illustrator is actually integrated with the Device Central, and so I've actually taken the same Illustrator file and just scaled it down to a mobile device. I'm just going to bring that up here. And so I actually went into the Device Central, picked a specific type of phone, and then it created a blank Illustrator document to these right dimensions. And now I can very quickly preview that in the Device Central in context. So I can go back into Device Central and see what that looks like. And you can actually see that I picked one of the Nokia phones. And so you can see how our content looks inside the context of the phone. Now, in this case, the even more exciting thing is you can go and then take that content into Flash and see it animate and see how it looks within the phone. So if this was a flashlight-enabled phone, you'd actually be able to create pretty rich experiences.
Really killer. All right, anything else?
Well, there's a lot more. There's definitely one other thing I want to show you, which I think is a very exciting addition in Illustrator CS3.
How has text changed, by the way? Have you done anything with text handling?
Since
so much work was done early on in Illustrator's life, but that was one of the things I always looked at Illustrator for, was really good text handling.
Yeah, and that's a key. That's one of our core strengths. In Illustrator CS, we introduced a new text engine that added a lot of text functionality, from being able to specify styling or use character and paragraph styles for repeated text elements, to OpenType support and rich OpenType support. So there's a lot that we've done to improve typography. Specific to Illustrator CS3, not a lot of functional improvements, but refining. We've gone back and fixed a lot of the little things that might not have worked perfectly. So one of the nice things is if you now scale text objects that have styles, indents, specific indents and tabs, will actually scale the tabs, which was something that many of our users had asked for. So a lot of small but significant improvements as well in CS3. So the last thing I think I'd like to show you is we introduced 2 Adobe Labs features in Illustrator CS3, and I talked to you about this Cooler panel, which ties us to the community. The other lab's functionality is a feature called Know-How. And Know-How is all about providing in-application help. So we talked about feature-rich, 20-year-old application that's incredibly powerful. And how can you get someone who may not have, most of our customers don't have a lot of time to learn the new capabilities or even to deepen their knowledge in existing ones. So this new feature allows you to very quickly get in-context help. So I'm just picking, as I pick different tools, you can see how it updates in context. It provides the short hint information. It also provides access to some of the key shortcuts that overload our tools and make them really powerful. So for the pen tool...
Is this an Illustrator only feature, by the way?
This is currently an Illustrator only feature,
yeah.
But we're certainly, again, the Adobe Labs functionality is a way for Adobe to test out new capabilities.
Yeah.
And we're
I was talking to the Photoshop
yeah.
team earlier about keyboard shortcuts, because so many of both the products don't rely, but they speed up when you learn the keyboard
Absolutely.
shortcuts.
So one of the new tools that we introduced is this crop area tool that I won't have a chance to show you, but for anyone doing work going to video, they'll be really interested in this. And you can see that the crop area tool, you now see all of the shortcuts. So, and as you're working contextually with it, like as I hold the command key, I can quickly see that shortcut being highlighted.
Yeah.
So it's very contextual. Now, perhaps the more exciting thing behind Know-How is if you want more help, you can hit the little search button. It brings up direct access to key topics within Adobe Help. But the most exciting part to this is that we also bring in useful topics that the community has created. So if I click on any one of these links, it'll bring up that web link in a browser, and we're actually linking to tutorials that the community has created. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, and you can see my Firefox is coming up, and it's showing me this tutorial on how to use the pen tool, in this case.
Wow.
On how to draw a cloud. And there's a lot of great content on the web. There's a lot of great content produced by people just like you. And one of the things that we want to do is to tap into that. So our community is perhaps our greatest asset. And they certainly understand the application in many ways, in a much deeper way than we do, or they integrate it in different ways. And so Know-How is all about tapping into that. So the content currently is bookmarked in a special account on Delicious, called the Know-How account.
I the icons there.
Yep. So you can actually get to it. If you want to see all of the results, you can click on More Results, and that'll take you to the right account. It's called Know-How on Delicious. But we want to engage with our community so that they propose new links to good content. And so we really think that over time this will become a great source of additional help.
That's great. And can I add, if I find a really killer tutorial, or if I write one on my blog,
Yep.
Can I add that in here?
So what you can do is you can, through the Delicious Network, you can propose a link that should be considered by Know-How. But this is version 1 of Know-How. Longer term, we'd really like to facilitate more direct submission of links by the community, and that's our long-term goal.
But obviously you don't want
Longer
somebody
term.
to game it or put spam in
Correct.
there and stuff like that.
Correct. So.
What about gradients?
What about gradients?
That always was a hot feature
Yeah.
back in the early
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah.
We can do gradients now, yay!
Yeah. So
I wonder if you had done anything.
Not
with
yet. Not yet. That's
Okay.
an area of interest for us. So
Okay.
hopefully, next release we'll do something pretty significant there.
Anything else that I can think of?
Performance is maybe
Yeah,
something
that's
you're
always
thinking
key.
of. So we really re-architected the drawing engine for better performance, and with changes in hardware technology, there's a lot of potential for us there. So now in CS3, we're leveraging multi-threading for better drawing performance,
Yeah.
and we've re-architected to do a better job of preserving whatever doesn't change now is cached, and so we're seeing 20 to 50% gains in drawing performance with comparing the same machine running CS2 and CS3. Now, if you're comparing Mactel with CS2 running under Rosetta and Illustrator CS3 running native, the gains are on the order of 200 to 300%. So anyone working on the Mac will be even more impressed by the performance gains.
Very cool. Any cool effects that have been added lately?
Well, there's been a lot that's been added since CS2, CS3. One thing that we did do in CS3 is in Illustrator CS2 we added support for the Photoshop filter gallery, and there were some limitations in terms of working with those filters when you were in CMYK space. And because of new technology that we introduced to preserve native color spaces, called, the geeky term is device N, we added device N support. You can now use CMYK effects or filters, you can use the Photoshop RGB filters in a CMYK document, so they're not grayed out, and so many people are going to actually see that as an improvement as well.
Any changes to how printing is done?
Well, so the device N feature is pretty significant, and it should, for anyone who's doing a lot of print work, especially around spot colors, they'll be pretty happy to see that. Live color is a big feature for anyone doing print focus work.
Yeah.
And one of the really small but subtle ease of use improvements is right from the get-go when you create a new document in Illustrator, you can now pick the type of document. So if I pick, say, a web document, it'll configure my interface correctly for that workflow. So you can see it set my color mode to RGB, raster settings to 72. But even my content, all of the additional content, the brushes, the swatches, all of that are going to be consistent with that workflow. So I think as we look forward, one of the key areas of opportunity for us is really to focus a little bit more on Illustrator in a given workflow. It's a great tool to create content for all media and to take content from one media to another. But how do we facilitate that through the user experience?
Anything about PDF that's changed?
So as any new release of Creative Suite will pick up the latest PDF library, latest PDF format. So.
Any new tools on the toolbar?
Oh yeah. So and it's great that you're giving me so much time to talk about. Let me show you with this file. Actually, we can go in. We've got.
Some people actually like my long and boring videos.
Well, hopefully they'll like this one. As you can see, I'm very passionate about this product, and the Illustrator team is very passionate. And when we go and talk to our customers, they are very passionate people, and we want to please them. And we think we'll please them with this new interactive eraser tool. So early on, I talked to you about how we're trying to make working in Illustrator feel more painterly.
Yep.
And this is one of the ways that we're doing that. We currently, what you might see here, I've got my transparency grid showing in the background, which
Yep.
is why we're seeing the transparency grid. It didn't erase through this gradient because that's actually a symbol, and we don't erase those symbols. But this might, for anyone who doesn't do as much vector work, it might not be totally apparent what's happening here. We actually are cutting through those paths, and you can see we're creating new points.
Yeah.
So that vector eraser is a very intuitive way now to sculpt your vector artwork, and we think it's a nice complement to the existing functionality.
That's really cool. Anything else?
Well, since you're giving me the time, let me show you one nice addition. For anyone who's doing cross-media work, I think they'll be pleased to see this new interactive crop tool that we've added. I'm just going to go ahead and so I've currently got this document. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so your users can see. And I now have this little crop tool. When I pick it, it shows me what is currently being cropped.
Right.
And I can now interactively move what is being cropped or what is not being cropped. And so the nice thing for cross-media work is that you can pick from standard sizes. So we didn't actually have any of the standard video sizes. So if you're doing work for video, you can now pick from one of the standard video sizes. And you get key markings within your crop now. You can see what the title safe area is. And so as you're designing for video, we have very tight integration with some of our video applications like After Effects and Premiere. And And so it's now very easy to create that content for video. Now the crop tool is meant to be is meant to make it really easy to take your content and to crop anything. So you can even just double click on a piece of content.
Yeah.
And I've currently got the title safe areas on, but I can just go ahead and turn those off if they don't apply for this crop. And now you can see we're just cropping this logo. So if I wanted to say take this out to web, I could just go to my Safe for Web dialog, and you can see all we're doing is we're cropping the logo. We still have that background image. I would probably just turn off that layer. And so with the new crop tool, we're making it really easy to use Illustrator as that blank canvas where you have all of your different related assets and you can just mark out what you want. We even support the ability to generate multiple crop areas. So if you wanted to mark out different things as potentially being ready for export, you can do that. There's one crop area that's active at any one time, but that's functionality that we'll probably continue to focus on in future releases, just making it even easier to take multiple assets out of Illustrator.
Wow. Are there different versions of Illustrator, or is there just one version? Like with Premiere, there was a couple versions.
Yeah, no, there's just the one version. So, and Illustrator is in 5 of the 6 new creative suites. So it really is a tool that is used in all of our key workflows in web, in print, in video, and even now you can see the integration for mobile creation, mobile content creation.
Yeah. I think we've covered pretty much everything I can think of that I haven't seen for a while. Anything else that you can think of to wow me? Anything new that's in the product?
Wow, I think we've actually managed to cover most everything.
Very cool.
I'm sure I'm going to miss. There's a lot of polish as well in CS3, but that might be something that a smaller number of your watchers will be interested in. And one thing I'm hoping is that anyone out there who's creating good tutorials will want to get their content up on their website, post it to our Delicious account, and then we can feed it back in. So really engaging with the community is going to be a great way to help everyone learn more about this powerful application.
Very cool. Well, thank you for inviting me up.
Well, no, thank you for talking.